Hey, yo, welcome back to the Late Night Vision Show. We've got another great episode for you this week, or at least we think it's great. We hope you do. My name is Jason, owner of Outdoor Legacy, one of your co hosts right here on the podcast. And as always, I've got Hans with me tonight. Hans, we have been getting into a lot of different shows this summer, a lot of I think we ought to call them like our practical series. They've been very practical. I had a guy on the phone tell me the other day, he's like, man, these have been very, things I can apply, things I can use. So I think we've got another one of those today, man.
Yeah, and there's been a couple of people that have commented on the show like all of this stuff you can find in the user's manual, but does anybody
True.
even read the user's
No,
manual on
no,
anything these days? Because we definitely get a lot of tech support calls, and it's
that's right.
a lot of people say the manuals are confusing, but nobody reads them, and that's okay. That's why you're here, because you want to learn this stuff. You don't want to read it. Why
That's
read it
right.
when you can like hear it from us? So if you are looking to purchase a brand new night vision or thermal optic, you can definitely do so through Outdoor Legacy, outdoorlegacy.com. You can call us directly, 877-350-1818. That's what we are here for. That's why we put out these shows. That's why we put out this information, not only to entertain you every week, but also to give you some information, help you decide on what optic might be right for you. That's why our show is very heavily tilted towards reviews. We do a lot of reviews. We put this information out. Jason and and Garrett, we put together all of this footage. Every review, we're doing about 2 to 3 minutes worth of through the optic video. And to get 2 to 3 minutes of video, that takes about 40 videos, which is
Yeah,
about 40 different nights. Not
yeah,
exactly, but it takes a lot of
it's a
video
lot.
just to create 5 second clips to go into one review video. So we do all that work, we do all the testing, we do that so that whenever you are trying to decide on an optic and you call us, you can find out our firsthand experience with that optic, but also how that one compares to what's out on the market right now and may what have been out on the market 10 years ago. Maybe you have a scope that's 10 years old. You want to know how your scope is going to compare to a brand new one. We can help you with that. We have the information, we have the knowledge. We've been doing this for quite a while. We would love to earn your business. 877-350-1818, outdoorlegacy.com. Jason, this is one of those, you said practical shows. I guess it's
Yeah.
kind of falls on the along the lines of common sense, but it's not always common sense because we do. It's like a deadline, like getting your driver's license renewed. You're like, okay, I know I've got to have it renewed by this point, but you just keep putting it off and putting it off, and then you're like, okay, I've got to do it. My license expires tomorrow, and then you try to get it an appointment with the DMV and they say you got to wait 2 months before you can come in. So that's procrastination. Don't procrastinate is the theme of this show, I would say, Jason. But let's talk about how to get people's thermal scope prepped up and ready for hunting season, which I would say, in my mind, this isn't on paper, but honestly, in my mind, hunting season really gets kicked off in the industry. I'd say Labor Day weekend, September 1st. I would say not now in Texas, we're always hunting, but it seems like that's when everything picks up. Would you agree, Jason?
I would agree. I think that what's going on there is Texas, Labor Day, September 1st is the opening of dove season. And so what that does is, and again, this show is not just for Texas, but I think it puts a lot of guys in Texas back in the field. A lot of guys are going out to their deer leases, going out to their farms, ranches, and they're checking corn feeders, filling corn feeders while they're out there. And it just starts getting people to thinking about, hey man, I got some hogs out here. Man, there's some hog damage. Oh man, I saw a coyote run across the road. And so I do think people start then. There's no question that, as it cools off in November, December, you really get going. And then I know up north, a lot of our Midwest guys, they've got, coyote seasons, and a lot of that comes in, in basically the new year, January, February, March. They'll have seasons coming in or going out. So it is, I do think we're getting to that time period where it's going to start picking up. I think when people start thinking about deer hunting, they're just obviously getting into the mood of hunting, and that starts making them think about, night hunting as well. It's funny. Hans is describing here about, renewing your driver's license or something like that and putting it off.
The
And
DMV
this
is
is
fresh on my
describing,
brain just from recent experiences.
yeah, exactly. I will be, my wife would tell you if I said I didn't procrastinate, she would get on here and probably, beat me over the head with something. But I do, but I try to be more prepared. I do think Hans of this duo is more the procrastinator than me. I do
I would
like
agree
being
with that.
prepared.
I would not describe you as a procrastinator. To me, you seem the complete opposite. I'm a procrastinator, but I do it for creative reasons. So,
Yeah, create. No, he does not. Let me just whatever. Well, we're way off topic. That's a whole nother kit and caboodle. So let me jump into this. So to me, this is, I want to say, common sense, but we have even maybe non procrastinators like me, or not as big of a procrastinator. We've all waited to the last minute to do something and go, oh, dad gummit. I think that getting your thermal ready for the season, and whatever your season is, you may not use this thing until February. Okay, maybe we're 6 months ahead. That's fine. Maybe you don't need to be 6 months ahead, but you do need to be a few months ahead. And here's why: if maybe last fall or last winter you were using your thermal scope, night vision scope, and you had some trouble with it. I don't know what it was. Maybe it was shutting off under recall. Maybe you were having some trouble getting it to come on. The power button was sticking. Maybe you were having some issues with one of the other buttons wasn't working right. Or, maybe if it's a thermal scope, this is something that we see a lot. I shouldn't say a lot. We see enough to say it's somewhat common. Is you may have the shutter in there when it calibrates might stick, and you'll know it's doing that if you see like a ghosted image of what you were just looking at, kind of on the screen. That means that the shutter in there didn't close quick enough or all the way when it did the calibration or the nuke or the refresh, as we call it. So a lot of little things like that. And there's guys that have big problems. I mean, the scope's just dead, won't come on, and it's just sitting there. It's like season's over. I put it in the gun safe, and I'm going to get around to that. I'm going to send it in. I'm going to get a return under the warranty with the manufacturer, but I just haven't done it. Now is the time to do that. Okay. So, and here's the reason why. You're watching this. It is probably late August, and you're at that point of we just, Hans said, it's fixing to get busy. It's fixing to get to that time. There's going to be a lot of guys in the next 90 days pulling their scopes out and going, oh my gosh, I've got a problem. I didn't know I had this problem. Or, yeah, I've still got the problem. The same problem that I had, 8 months ago, still here. And they're going to start sending those optics in. So what's going to happen is a lot of the manufacturers, the customer service is going to get backed up, and it could take you longer to get that repaired. Now, I know there's some companies that have got, repair windows of, hey, we can get this done in 5 days and whatever, and that's fine. But what can happen is when they get really, really busy, it can take them longer to get you that, return authorization that for the warranty when you send the email or you give them a call before they can get you the return built. Might take them a little longer. I'm just making the point. Now is the time. You would much rather send this in now than when they're slammed with 100 other scopes. I would rather, if a guy's going to work on my scope, I'd like it to be the guy go, okay, I got two scopes to work on today. Let's get this thing figured out versus I've got 200 scopes to work on today. I think which one of these is going to get a little more attention. So now is the time. But also, go ahead and inspect your scope. I mean, you may say, I don't have any problems. Good. Get it out. Bust the thing out, turn it on, play with it. If you got a laser rangefinder, is it still working? Or, are all the buttons working? Can I get into the menus? Hook it up to your computer or to your phone if you do that. Just give it the old once over and make sure everything is good to go physically. There's nothing wrong with it. Internally, when you turn it on, the menus and just everything is going. I know you're like, okay, this is obvious, and you've talked about this for 5 minutes. You're beating a dead horse. But the reason we're doing this is because of the number of phone calls that we get during season when guys are absolutely in sheer panic mode and we can't repair anybody's scope. Okay. No dealer can fix your scope. And guys will call us, and truthfully, they know this is not a button press to fix it. They know it's a major problem, but they're so Hail Mary, and they're looking for the fix, and they call us like, I've got a hunt and it's this weekend and my scope's doing XYZ. What do I do? And we're like, man, you got to send it in. Is there anything else I can do? Unfortunately, not in this situation or whatever. So anyway, now's the time.
Well, I am in the talking about procrastinating. When it comes to this kind of stuff, I'm the type that says, yeah, it's doing this problem, but it'll fix itself. It'll go away. It'll work itself out, and I'll turn it back on in a few months, and it won't do it. Well, let me tell
Yeah.
you, it never just stops doing it on its own.
Yeah.
It's
That's
gonna,
rare.
you're gonna have to. I guess, the optimist, and I was like, oh man, it'll get better. It'll go away. It never does. Send it in now, rather than later, rather than waiting. So that's all good. Let's talk about the next thing that you really need to pay attention to, and this is always, to me, Jason, the cloudiest part of the conversation, and that's firmware updates. We've done a whole entire show on firmware updates. Some manufacturers encourage you to do them right away, right when they come out. There are some that say, don't do it unless there's something wrong with your scope. There's a lot of confusion. We get calls from people like, hey, there's a firmware update. Should I do it? Is it gonna ruin my scope? I do believe that right now a lot of these manufacturers have sent out some firmware updates through their app or through online, where you can go to their website and download the firmware update. Some of them resolve bugs and issues and stuff. I saw somebody post something on Facebook recently, Jason, where they said, hey, my scope shows that there's a firmware update and it says that there's bug fixes. Does anybody know what the bugs are? Well, here's the thing. Every single iPhone update that you do says fixes bugs. Nobody ever knows what the bugs are, and it doesn't mean because it's correcting a bug, that doesn't mean that bug is ever going to show its head to you. That doesn't mean it's ever going to affect your scope. So there are firmware updates for a lot of these scopes right now. I would say, and Jason, you might disagree, if you're concerned about it, I think the best thing to do is just to call the manufacturer and say, hey, I noticed that there's a firmware update. Do you recommend that I do that? Do you recommend that I do? I know that AGM recently, and AGM's been in the past not so enthusiastic about doing firmware updates, but now they have a recent update on one that we did with the Adder V2, that really did some good things with the reticle, with the picture image. So that was a good firmware update. But I would say, check your scope, see if there's a firmware update available. If you're concerned about it, reach out to the manufacturer, to the tech support, and just ask them, do you recommend that I do this firmware update on my scope? And they'll let you know, and then you can decide from there. But that's always yeah.
Yeah, no, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I know you got some more stuff to talk about. I want to real quick speak to the firmware update, and I don't want to rehash the whole show we did on them. But to put it in a nutshell, Hans and I are very much, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I'll be honest with you, I don't have an optic in my possession right now that I have done a firmware update on this calendar year. Okay. And I mean, Hans did the one on the adder that he's using because AGM recommended it to us.
Yeah, they
They
reached out to us and told
specifically
us
said that they
to do
reached
it.
out to us and said,
Yeah.
hey, you ought to do this update. It's going to improve the reticles. There's some image quality updates. You need to do this. So they advised it, and that's why we did it. But if I see an update pop up, I don't. I mean, I'm going to look at it, and they give you some synopsis of what it does. Okay, it says, it may say bug fixes, but it may say improves this or adds this feature or whatever. If I'm happy with my scope today, and there's not some feature listed that's like, oh my gosh, I need this, even if it says like image boost or what does that mean? If I don't if I haven't had five other people tell me you need to do this, it's worth it, or it doesn't solve a problem or add a feature that I want or need, I'm not doing it. And my reasoning goes back to Hans and I again take the approach of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Every single firmware update is a type of surgery, and surgery goes perfect most of the time, but it doesn't always. And you can brick your scope, you can cause problems that you didn't have before. So there are inherent dangers with every single firmware update. Thus, that's why we're saying to do this now. If you open your scope up in, you know, August, September, October, and you go, hey, there's a firmware update, and maybe I need to do this. Now's the time to do that, because if you do have a problem with that, you would much rather do it now and know that now than, a week before your big hunt or your big tournament or whatever. So again, we're not saying don't do them. We're just saying our opinion is there needs to be a reason. And if you are going to do it, a firmware update is not something you want to do, the day before the big hunt.
Exactly right. And yes, if there's nothing wrong with your scope, I mean, there's really no need to do it unless you really feel like you want to do it. There's some guys when Apple comes out with a update on their phones, they're like right away downloading, and I get
Right.
that, but it's a good rule of thumb. Nothing wrong with your scope. Don't mess with it. This is also a great time. One of the I guess one of the second biggest issues that we see sometimes when it comes to getting your scope ready is batteries. Making
Yeah.
sure that your batteries are in good condition. Now is the time to check them. I would make sure charge however many batteries you have, charge them all up, run them in your scope for a while. Make sure that you're not eating through batteries really quick. Make sure that the battery light indicator is reading those battery levels right, so you know that you have a healthy battery. Just do an overall charge them all the way up. It wouldn't hurt to run them all the way down. Get a full charge
Right.
up and run down,
Mm-hmm.
cycle them through a couple
Mm-hmm.
times. That does not hurt the battery. That's actually good for the battery, is to go through them. So try that. I would also recommend doing a test run. And I know that everybody doesn't have the luxury that we do, Jason, where they can walk out their door and go hunt. If you're in an area, if you live in a neighborhood, if you don't have hunting ground that you can just run to whenever you want, take your scope, take your binocular, take your scope off the rifle. Don't carry your rifle around,
Mm-hmm.
but walk around the neighborhood for an hour or two. Get in, carry your
Mm-hmm.
thermal, and just scan with it a little bit. I know you might look a little bit weird. If you can go to a park, that might look even weirder. But still, take your take
Sit
your
in the
optical.
backyard. How about that?
Yeah, drive out to some place where you don't know people, but take your scope on a test run to just make sure your batteries are doing all right. Make sure that if that scope's turned on for a couple hours, maybe if there is a problem, it'll show up. Whether, sometimes these things have trouble when it's nuking, they can get stuck on a nuke cycle or whatever. But anyway, take your scope out, take it out for a little bit, run it for a little while. That way, again, you're doing this before that season starts. You have time to address the issues.
Yeah, so speaking of batteries, this is something I thought of while you're talking. We have seen this many times. I'm not predicting this for this year, but we have seen it probably every year with some, manufacturer's proprietary battery where there'll be a shortage and there's not enough of them, and there's people, man, I'm going on this hunt, I'm going off for 2 weeks, I need a bunch of batteries, and no dealer in the country has them because the manufacturer hadn't had them in a month, and they're not going to get a container of them for another month. And so, if you've got proprietary batteries, that's a big deal. Go ahead, if you know you need a spare battery, get it now, have it. You can test it, make sure that it's good when you get it. You'll have it already for when you go on the hunt. And a lot of the scopes are taking, 18650 batteries. Guys, we love 18650s, but there is a lot of confusion around 18650 batteries. This is a negative. We can talk about this sometime, talking about batteries in a show, but there is almost no set standards on these 18650s because there's longer ones, there's shorter ones. You have the flat tops, you have the button tops, you've got bigger diameters, and we talk to a lot of people that are like, hey, I wanted 18650s. I got them, and I bought three batteries, and they don't work in my scope. You know, they look the same until I put them up there, and one's shorter and one's longer, and one. So even if you get, generic batteries like 18650s, go ahead. If you need some more, get them now. Make sure they fit, make sure they work. And I'm 100% with Hans. Charge them all the way up, run them all the way down, charge them all the way back up. I think that's very good for these batteries, and it lets you know realistically what kind of runtime you're getting as well. Moving on, I can make this short and sweet. I think this is what seems the most obvious, but again, sometimes the procrastination is strong, and that is actually, if you've done number one, you've done number two, and everything's good. Take your scope, have it on the rifle, and go to the range and shoot it. Go check your zero. Go make sure everything is working because number one, some problems aren't going to show up until there is recoil. That these are electronics. Think about this. I mean, this is like a little, computer, and the recoil of some of these rifles is like hitting that computer with a 3 pound sledge over and over and over. So you've got wires that could get loose. You've got solder joints that could go bad. You've got, little circuit boards that could have a short. So there's a lot of things that could go on. So sometimes you're not going to find one of these problems until you actually shoot it. So you could do everything we've talked about and feel like, man, I'm good. There's nothing wrong with my scope. And then you go out there again a few days before the hunt and figure out when you shoot it that there is. And obviously, you want to check those zeros again before you go hunting. I know that seems obvious to everybody, and I'm sure most guys do that, but you want to do that. But another thing is just getting familiar again with your scope. I'm going to be honest, guys. Hans and I see a lot of different scopes. So, a lot of times we have a hard time memorizing one certain scope. But even the scopes that we end up keeping around for ourselves or whatever, if I pull one out of the safe and I haven't used that scope in 3, 4, 5, 6 months, it's kind of, there's a learning curve. It's like getting back on the bicycle. Yeah, I may remember how to ride the bicycle, but I may have to put my foot down to keep from falling a couple times. I've got it. Where's this in the menu? Oh, okay, yeah, there's that. And oh, this button just changed my color palette. I didn't want to do that. You don't want to be fighting all that out there when you're in the field when it really matters. Refamiliarize yourself with the optic. I'm going to tell you something else you need to do. It's again obvious, but before you shoot, check your mounts. Get in there and make sure that your mount is tight. Everything is good to go there. It's tight actually to the bottom of your scope, and make sure that the screws going into there, and then make sure that it's tight as well on your rifle, and everything's good there. So just some more common sense tips. But I think, Hans, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think what we're trying to say is just get the optic out, go over it with a fine tooth comb, make sure everything is good, all the way from turning it off, turning it on, function test, battery life, actually getting it on the range, on your rifle, checking it out, and then just being ready when the big day comes.
That is exactly right. And I would say that if you've done all this and you think you got all the I's dotted and T's crossed and you're good to go, then you should have no problems going through the summer or through the season with your optic. And I think that this really is a very, like you said, we've talked about it many times, common sense. There's a lot of things on here though that are important to keep in mind. I really do think the battery test cycle is very important to do that. But if you've heard all that and you're like, man, I don't know if I'm still ready, if you purchase your optic from Outdoor Legacy, we can definitely help you with that. But if you're looking for a brand new optic, that's what we're here for. We'd love to earn your business. You can call us 877-350-1818, outdoorlegacy.com. And Jason, we've got many more shows coming up, many more reviews. And you reminded me something last week. We're about to start getting into the best of shows for the year. So we do about 6 or 7 of these, and we choose our favorite scope in a certain price range. We do night vision, we do handheld binoculars, but we choose our favorites. and that usually covers like 2 months, 2.5 months, and it's every week. So it is about to get really busy with the best of shows, and those are our most popular, Jason.
They are. Those are by far the most popular of the year. I'm excited about it. There's a lot of them to do. Hans and I were talking about. We've also got some new optics we think are going to be coming out here very soon. Some stuff probably even release in October, November. So we're kind of like, how are we going to do the best of and get these reviews done? So we're going to have a busy fall, but we're excited. We're ready to get into it. And so guys, we appreciate you coming, watching the show, listening if you're doing it on any of the podcast apps. We would love to have you back here next week and any other week. And you can do that if you're watching on YouTube by liking, by subscribing, clicking the little bell icon, which that gives you the notifications when we've got a new show that's dropped, which is every Thursday. If you're on one of the podcast apps, you can subscribe there as well. If you want to find out more about Outdoor Legacy or Hans or the Late Night Vision Show, all the social medias, which Facebook, YouTube, Instagram. Just search Hans ETX. That's Hans ETX, Hans East Texas. Again, Outdoor Legacy, Late Night Vision Show. You can find us there. Keep up with what is going on. Hans has got a bunch of reviews and hunting videos on his channel. So that's something that is a little bit different than what we're doing here on this show. So you may like that as well. Guys, we really appreciate you coming and watching, listening today. Hope to see you back here next week. Between now and then, y'all stay safe.